Hello everyone, welcome to today's Java programming tutorial, and for today's video we all explore the three common iterative statements in Java: the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. And by the end of this video, we all have a solid understanding of how to use each of construct on your Java programs. Let's start with a for loop. This loop is excellent for when you know in advance how many times you want to repeat a block of code. There's a simple example of how it works. In this Java example, int I is equals 0 is initialized part of where you declare an initial the loop control variable. I in this case I is greater than 5 is the condition part, specific when the loop should continue executing. I++ is the iterations part of defining how the loop control variable is updated after each interactions. The code inside is the curly braces is the block of codes that get executed in each iterations. In this case, it's print a current variable of I. Secondly, let's break down the previous data. Int I equals 0 initialize a variable I to 0. This is starting point of the loop. Second is I is greater equal 5. This is the condition that need to be true for the loop to continue executing. As long as I is the less than or equal to 5, the loop will run. The third one is I plus plus increments the value of I by 1 after each iteration of the loop. And curly bracket includes the block of code that will be executed in each iteration of the loop. System out print number plus I printed the current value of I, along with the string number to the console in each iteration. Putting all together, this loop will run 6 times 0 to 5, printing the number 0 through number 5 to the console. Next, we have while loop. This used when you want to repeat a block of code as long as a certain condition is true. It's more flexible than the for loop, making it ideal for situations where another number of iteration isn't known beforehand. This program initializes a variable I to 0 and then enter a while loop. The loop will continue executing as long as I is less than 5. In each iteration, it prints a current value of I, along with the string number to the console and increment I by 1. The loop will run until I is no longer less than 5. Int I equals 1. This declares an integer variable I, initialize it with the value of 1, while I is greater equal 5, and curly bracket. This begins a while loop that will continue executing the code inside the curly brace as long as the condition is I greater than equal to 5. This this is true. System out print number plus I. This line print the current value of I along with the next and text number to console. I plus plus. This increments the value of I by 1. Close bracket. This marks the end of the while loop. So the loop continues iterating. As long as I is less than or equal to 5. Printed the value of I at each iteration increments I until the reaches 6. The output will be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. Uh, Once I becomes 6, the condition I equals and I greater than equals 5 become false and the loop exits. Now let's move on to the do while loop. This loop is similar to the while loop, but it's guaranteed that the block of code will execute at least once even if its condition is literally false. Certainly, the do-while loop is another type of loop in Java. Similarly to the while loop, however, it has a key difference. The do-while loop guaranteed that the loop's body will be executed at least once, regardless of the loop conditions. Now, let's discuss and let's create a block of code using do-while loop. First is int I equals 1. This declaration is integer variable I. Initialize it with the value of 1. Do start with the open curly bracket. This marks a beginning of the do while loop. The code inside the following block will be executed at least once. This line at that print number plus I. This line printed the current value of I along with the text number to console. And another down of it is I 1 I plus plus. This increment the value of I by 1 and ends up with the following block of code. Station will input back curly bracket while I is greater equal to 5 condition. This is the while condition that follows the do block. The loop will continue executing as long as the conditions I is greater equal 5 is true. The output of this code will be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Even even though the condition is checked out at the end of the loop, the do while loop ensures that the code inside of the loop executed at least once. In this case, it's printed the number from 1 to 5. Once I becomes 6, the condition becomes the false and the loop exits. Video, I'm going to show you the difference between do while loop and the while loop. Now I'm going to show you how to discuss while the difference between do while and while loop, because some of people that they look these two loops the samely. That's why I'm gonna write a code with a different output even though they have a different block of codes. Now in the first, we're gonna assume that we create a int variable and declared I equals to 0. Then semicolon. In other hands, let's create while loop first. Then create implement conditions. Then this, after we create the condition, we start inside of the while loop code. Started with the open curly bracket, printed out a system that other print. Let's call it execute execute to show out that if the loop was uh, started, it will execute. It will output execute. Then in the other hands, outside the loop, we'll create a system that out that print, and let's say called it none for showing a none condition. In the other hands, now let's start to create a do while. Let and let's name it with a J and equals to 0. The samely with the while loop, the block of code are equally the same, and just differently to declare J and I. Then inside the do while loop, let's print out execute. Then this after do, let's input the condition I is less than 0. After that, outside in the loop, let's create a system.out print. The same way then in the while loop, none. None. Now let's run it. Sorry, I forgot the semicolon in the line 11. That's why I'm gonna put it 1. In your hand, now, wait. Let's create a block of code. Then let's put a line between the while loop and the do while loop to show out the difference between these two. Now let's put n
and line n, line n, line n. Kasi some error. Now, as you see in the output, the none, the while loop execute none, not none, and you can even see the execute system inside the while loop. And in the other hand, the do while loop, it will show that executed and the none. In the block of code, the while loop execute outputs have a none, and the while loop execute the execute string and the none. That's why there are it will show us the difference between these two. That the do while loop execute the code first after the condition, and the while loop the condition first after the uh, block of codes. That's why the while loop execute the none after uh, execute the outside string of the code than the do while loop that execute the block of code and then outside of the loop.